Perfect. All right. Well, I think we have a room starting to fill up, Jay. So I think we'll be in good shape if we want to go ahead and start kick this thing off. So first off, general welcome to everyone who's decided to try out Clubhouse along with us to see, what this platform is all about. What our hope is with these Mograph lunches is to really kind of dive into sort of three overarching topics. We want to talk about the news of the industry, so anything that's been going on that's relevant over the course of the past week since we had our previous lunch. We want to talk about some specific projects, so anything that we've seen online that we particularly like, and just talking about the creative that went in behind that. And then the last little bit is industry topics, so general industry topics. So we'll call these NPGs for short. So news, projects, and then general industry topics that we'll go through. So the way that we're going to try to set this up today, Jay and I are going to kind of go through everything initially between the two of us. Try to keep it relatively short on our end as far as the conversation goes, going through these three topics, hopefully in the course of about 20 to 30 minutes. And then we want to open it up to anyone else who has any questions in regards to anything that we've been talking about. And then, of course, our goal is hopefully to make this a weekly thing. So if folks have topics they're interested in, things they want to talk about on more of a platform or forum, we'll have that opportunity. So to start, let's just give a quick introduction. So my name is Matt Garrison. I'm one of the co-founders and executive producers at Dash, a high-end animation and motion design studio located in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm joined by Jay Brown. Jay, you want to give a quick introduction?
Hi, yeah, I'm Jay Brown. I'm an animator and designer. I've been at it for almost 10 years now, and with Dash for almost 4, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and then I do a little bit of everything, do 3D, 2D, but love character stuff. So that's kind of been my focus for a while now.
Nice. I also used to do a bunch of things, and then I guess I don't anymore. I don't know how that happened. One time I animated and I was actually pushing keyframes.
You still do a lot of things. It's just pivoted.
It's just pivoted to a little bit different stuff. Cool. All right. Well, so one of the first things, Jay, that I feel like we could jump into, and I feel like it's sort of the elephant in the room because it's all that's been talked about on Twitter and things over the course of the last week, and we might even lose some people as soon as we say this because they're tired of talking about it. But it's sort of crypto art. A big piece of news that I saw recently. Yeah, big piece of news that I saw recently. Mike Winkleman, aka Beeple, just had his first Nifty Gateway resold for $6.6 million. So this makes it the most expensive digital art ever auctioned off, which is kind of crazy to think. And as someone who really doesn't understand any of this, I need someone to explain this to me, whether it's you or someone listening in. But the whole crypto art scene is really intriguing to me. Not only in sort of our world, the motion world, but you have things like NBA Top Shot, which is essentially like virtual sports cards. They've had partnerships now with the NBA where you can basically license these, moments in time, like a LeBron dunk and things like that, and that market's grown to 230 million. So this seems like something that's kind of here to stay. I don't know. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on crypto art in itself? Is this good for industry? Is it bad for industry? Is it just evolving?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what is it? I think that's the question everyone's asking. It's like, I think my initial response to it is that I think it's an awesome thing. Of course, there's been a lot of negative news around the environmental impacts of it, which we talk about in a little bit. But yeah, I think it's awesome. It feels like it legitimizes this format, the digital realm, a little bit. And I think that's a win for all of us,
Yeah, it's interesting to me. So if folks were curious, NFTs stand for non-fungible tokens. So basically, it's essentially run on blockchain, and the idea is that they can't be replaced. So what I've taken away from it, I guess, is trying to for me, the hard part is why would you want to pay so much money for a digital piece of artwork, but I also don't want to just sit here and be a hater for people who want to make that stuff, because I think it's really cool. But I guess the only thing I can kind of perceive it as is it's almost like a trading card or something like that. This is like a digital element. Why do people have collections of old baseball cards or things like that? Is this just not like a new thing to be dealt with?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like baseball cards is sort of like a fair way of looking at it. one of the ways I've been thinking about it is it's sort of like, if like a classical painting or something like that is auctioned off, it generally has a certificate that comes with it, that it's been looked at by professionals and it's been found to be like the original piece.
Right.
Like it's like almost kind of like that for digital art. It's creating this singular thing that can be proven and not replicated. So it's like almost a way of I don't know, legitimizing or creating like a single version that the value is attached to for that piece of art.
Well, it's really interesting to me. Again, I'll preface that I don't know a ton about this stuff, and looking forward to the conversation that comes from this here shortly with anyone else who wants to chime in on it. But to me, it does seem like it gives power to the artist a little bit. You think about brokers or people who traditionally deal with like, what is the status quo when it comes to dealing with artwork? A defined artwork is, by what a gallery says is artwork and what they sell and the commission they take from this. Whereas like this, it kind of gives the power to kind of, I don't know, circumvent a broker, kind of go directly to the source and sell it to people who want to buy it. I don't know.
I mean, this is kind of pivoting a little bit, but it's just been interesting to see, a lot of these artists that I followed for a long time on Twitter, and they're selling stuff that they had been making anyways for a long time. So it's just cool to see them get some real money for their work.
Well, I think about Beeple, and he was doing the one-a-days for whatever, like 13 years, like something crazy, right? So, props to him for finally getting the payday for all that stuff, because that was clearly a ton of work. But yeah, I don't know. Is there something, this was circulating a little bit, I think, on some of the folks who don't really align with these NFTs and crypto artwork, is the environmental impact of some of this stuff. I think it was an article that maybe I read by Justin Cohn, who posted something that was linked to this, but it was talking about sort of the environmental impact of it, and I'm just pulling a line from it. It says, there's been 80,000 transactions relating to NFTs on the crypto art NFT market site SuperRare, which is just one of the many crypto art NFT platforms. And the footprint of a single transaction relating to NFTs on SuperRare averaged across all 80,000 transactions, that's including minting, bidding, sales, transfers, is with emissions is 47 kilograms of CO2. So that's just like a crazy amount that we're emitting. Is there, we have ethics in design with what we do, right? So we think about inclusivity, as we're designing, there's a responsibility of designers to make sure that we're being inclusive with what we're representing in our creative work. Does that same process apply to this? As we're thinking about the environmental impact that it could be had by minting these things, like, is there a responsibility of designers to like have to be cognizant of that?
Yeah, I think so. I keep thinking, I can't remember who said this, but it was like, of course, of course artists are finally being paid, but it means that we have to like burn the forest down for it to happen. Yeah, no, I think we do have a responsibility, and I think that conversation is being had, and that is causing pressure on these companies to do something about it. And I don't know the specifics, and hopefully someone later on can maybe fill us in or give us more information on this. But my understanding is that there are little things that these companies can do to reduce emissions, like drastically. But it doesn't seem like it's sort of a priority for them right now. So making that happen, how do we do that?
Interesting. Good point. All right, let's table this conversation from the news segment, and let's pivot over to maybe a project that we want to talk about. How's that sound to you, Jay?
Sounds good.
So I know one that you and I were kind of looking at recently that kind of stuck out to us as just being a favorite project that we've seen come out recently was a piece directed by Sam Southwick with Nexus Studios. So the project was Davos, I believe it was Davos World Economic Forum, for it was a Google piece. Basically, the theme was creating a shared future in a fractured world. So for the folks, I know you're listening in, you can't see this piece, but it's by Nexus Studios. If you wanted to go and look at Sam Southworth's profile, you can navigate to it there. It's also, I believe, on their Instagram. It was one of the more recent posts that they had.
What's the title of it again?
Yeah, it's called Davos, Davos, World Economic Forum for Google. And I think if you also just Google Nexus Studios Instagram, I think it's going to be one of the more recent posts that they just put up there. I'm navigating to it right now to confirm. Yeah, it's about their 5th post in from the recent. So, it's this piece just resonated with both of us as we were talking about ones we wanted to share, just because I think there's so many great little details that are going into it. In fact, I didn't realize initially, Jay, that this is actually an interactive piece. So what we're seeing right now is just the animation side of it. But the final deliverable was actually set up in Zurich, Switzerland, in a window display. And the idea is that people and passerbys could come up and they could trigger this animation to kick into gear. Yeah, there's a little handle that comes out and you squeeze it and it controls 9 motors that are happening. And those 9 motors trigger various lights in these 5 displays, which are housing these animations. And a couple of key notes that I found that I thought was really interesting was that it had over 200 animated characters in this piece, which is really cool. You can just see all the little details that go into it. But I think you and I, at least for me, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was I just really love like the texturing in this piece. Like it just feels like a little kind of model or like a diorama. And every time I watch it, there's like a little bit more detail that like I missed the first time. Just like little animations that I know that maybe the general public doesn't pick up on, that at least you and I can salivate over a little bit, which is really cool. But yeah, a couple of reasons why I like this one a lot.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I know we were talking earlier too, like this has kind of been a thing in 3D recently where it's kind of like a flat illustrated style that is then sort of extruded into 3D. Sort of what they're going for here, it seems like. I just love that. I love the whole blending of the two worlds.
Yeah, and I've just been a personal fan of like 3D work that kind of resembles something that would be captured in camera. So it feels very tactile to me. So like, even though I know this was all, actually some of this was actually animated, but the set and the build for the actual environment had some construction to it. And so I think that's one of the reasons why they went with this style, is it sort of accents it a little bit. So it kind of lives within this display that is very handmade. And so they have to have an animation that doesn't feel like too foreign in relationship to that. So that's one of the reasons I think they really leaned into the sort of textures that kind of go into it, which is really cool. I pulled up a little bit of info on Sam Southwick because I was curious, just sort of his background. This is the director who did this. So Sam, his versatility, this is from the Nexus website. It says Sam's versatility and endurance, sense of humor is a common thread throughout his work, and he means he is able to tackle poignant subject matters by thoroughly bringing them to life in a variety of immense worlds. He's worked on really cool projects. His recent creative highlights include a Mika piece, Goodness, along with Wyden Kennedy, Amsterdam, Wrestlers, a hilarious animated short celebrating the arrival of Bose Renault 2. I think I actually saw that one. I remember that one. But really cool stuff. He has a very nice like stop motion type feel, which is really fun. Makes me want to like win more of this work, and start doing some of this stuff on our side.
These big installments, that'd be so cool. Do you know, does it say anything if this was done in Unreal Engine or not? Because I see that there's some like interactive stuff going on.
That's a really good question. When I was looking, they have a behind the scenes video on their website. So nexusstudios.com/work/cloud, you can actually go and see the interactive installation behind the scenes. But from what I could see, they had a lot of the stuff that was living within Cinema, but I'm not sure exactly how they rigged and had all the triggers happening. One of the interesting things about it, though, when you go to the site that's really cool is they had one of the CDs at Nexus talking about this, Alex Jenkins, and he said, with a window display, a creative challenge that you have is like, we're all so busy and we're just kind of walking by. Like, how do you grab someone's attention to make sure that they're willing to like try to play with something? And so they have these big, if you picture the Google Cloud in your brain, they have these big like glowy handles that are like coming off the window. And so they're just kind of dangly there. So it like kind of lures you in to like want to grab something.
What the hell is this?
Yeah, so I love the simplicity behind it too. It's like real simple, and the fact that the audience can like work with animation, I don't know, to me this speaks very much to like where the future of motion design is like how do you break down the foundations of like where work lives, like how do you activate spaces, right? As we get back to some normalcy after this pandemic, I think there's going to be a bigger need for like activating more spaces. How do you bring together mediums so it's not just digesting it on a device, but there's a whole element to it with like the interaction of kind of where you are, which is really cool.
Yeah, totally. And maybe this is a conversation for another day, but we're seeing more and more motion graphic stuff going over to like Unreal Engine, for those kind of things where you can have these interactive elements, like lights can shift in real time based on, some interaction.
Right. No, I totally agree. Totally agree. All right. Well, to keep the conversation moving, so we talked about news, we talked about projects. The last thing, on our NPG list is just sort of general industry topics. And you like that acronym, the NPGs? We made it up like 30 minutes before this call, but I think it's a good structure. So one thing I think would be worth talking about is something that I've seen that's really prevalent in our industry as of late is sort of education in motion design. I had this really interesting conversation with a couple of students yesterday. I mean, these are 19-year-old kids who go to NC State University, really talented animators and designers. And they were asking me, they've kind of started their own little ship that they're working on right now to run their own little studio. And they're like, hey, we want to do this. Is school worth it? Like, should we continue our education? I'm not even sure. I think they're like sophomores, right? 19, I think you gotta be like a sophomore at that point. And, I told them that I can't tell them what to do. I'm not going to be responsible for a kid either going to school or dropping out of school.
Too much responsibility.
Too much responsibility. So all I did was tell them a little bit about, my past and kind of how I got to where I am, the benefits and the pros and cons of going to school. Now, for folks who don't know this, Jay and I both went to school together. So we both went to College of Design at NC State University. I was there for 5.5 years because I was really indecisive on what I wanted to do. But I look back at that time, and Jay, I want to hear your take on this as well. And it is sort of a mixed bag. Like, I learned a lot about design fundamentals and the basics for a lot of the work that we are doing. But the vast majority of the stuff I learned as it pertained to like animation and process and all that stuff, that happened like after school for me. So that was like internships, that was, junior level positions at agencies, and that was kind of grinding through it. But I do think that foundation that I learned helped shape a lot of that, and also some of those connections that I made. Now, those are like the positives. Now, the negatives for me were that I knew by the time I was like, the last couple of years that I wanted to get into animation and motion graphics, but I also still had to like swing these other classes that I had on my plate, right? Some gen ed stuff and things like that, where I really wanted to just be doing motion. And so that was kind of a bummer when I knew at that point in my time that I really wanted just more of the motion side of things. And so I basically had a curriculum that wasn't exactly tailored to where I wanted to go at that point in time. So that was sort of a negative of it. I don't know. How do you feel about on your end? Was it a similar experience or?
Oh, 100%. I had to take horse science one time. when I could have been practicing my animation skills, I was studying horse anatomy. So yes, I completely agree with you. I think that definitely a dual-sided thing. Like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I met so many people, and in fact, I loved school, but then at the same time, it is expensive. You have to take things that don't really pertain to what you're interested in. And then especially seeing places like School of Motion now, where, they have all of this top industry talent.
Exactly.
And you have access to these people.
I think it's like a broader thing too. I mean, I think School of Motion, you got Mograph Mentor, I see Haley's in here. We have Motion Hatch, the future. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that is making this content more accessible for the masses. And it's tailored to what we're doing a little bit more than maybe what we got in school, which was a little bit more general,
Yeah. And just to add to that too, even like, YouTube tutorials, people taking that front as well. There's a ton of information and knowledge to get from those too, which are free for the most part.
Now, I will say that, like, looking back at school, I wouldn't say that there's one definitive connection, one definitive thing that really set me on a trajectory to get to where I am now running Dash. But there was a lot of good things that did happen. I will say that having a well-rounded education and, learning about things other than just design is important, because that's ultimately going to influence you. I mean, we're lying to ourselves if we say that we're designers and we're only focused on designers. I mean, we have to be very cognizant about these other things. We're constantly learning about different subject matters, and we're pulling from our past experiences. And so when your past experience is broader, when you have a general education, you have different experiences, I think that does make you stronger designers and animators. So, I look back and kind of like what you were saying, like, yeah, sure, there were some little gaps in there, but I still look back at NC State in really high regard. I graduated and I had about $30,000 in debt when I graduated from state, and I was lucky enough to get into a career that ultimately paid pretty well, and that I was able to pay off those loans actually in the last couple of years. But I know a lot of people aren't that lucky to like find that niche that quickly. And so if you can go to one of these things like, finding resources on Motion Hash or take a couple classes on School of Motion, and your work looks really good. I mean, I know from a hiring perspective, when we're looking to bring folks into Dash, I'm not really looking at resumes for where people went to school. I mean, maybe eventually if they're on a short list, but for me, it's like, what's the work look like? Do they have a process? Would they be a good fit for what we're doing here at Dash? And that's where like the eyes really go for it, which is interesting. Hey y'all, thanks again for joining us for the first Mograph lunch. As a reminder, this is just the first part of a longer conversation that happens every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Clubhouse. We'll continue the NPG conversations. We talk about news, projects, and general industry advice. And then we'll open up the door on Clubhouse to answer questions live, interact with some of your peers, and get to know some of the folks in the industry. Follow the link below for more information, and we will see you next week.